preparing for adolescence. This is milestone number 4. My name is Dave Thomason. This is my wife Janice. Obviously, Greg and Angie. So this will be our 3rd time doing this milestone. So we're going to go and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, by the way.
So yeah, that's our family. So my wife and I, and then Isabella there, she's 15. Jude is 12, he'll be 13 on Thanksgiving. Law is 10, he's laying there on the ground. And then, where's Asher?
He's on top of Law.
Oh, Asher's on top of Law. Asher's 5,
Sorry.
and then Lorelai is 2. She's doing that's her Kung Fu pose that she's doing right there. So, with 3 boys in the middle, I have really reverted back to middle school humor. I thought I had grown out of it, but anything with balls, nuts, like
It's on.
I think I'm probably the worst of the crew now.
I believe it.
That's the environment of our home. And with soccer practice, so he's like, "Hey boys, grab your balls." Anyhow.
I think I'm in the wrong class.
And I think for Angie and I, one of the things that we want to emphasize is, first of all, we're not experts in this, nor do we think like, well, we've kind of been through this and now we're like looking back over our many years of wisdom and parenting. We feel like we're just kind of co-laborers, we're just journeying through this process of parenting just like you are, and we've just spent some time talking together and considering some of these things. So really that's kind of the reservoir of what we're sharing out of is just our process before God. So do you have anything you want to say? No? You good?
I'm good.
All right, well covered. All right, this is our family. I picked this particular picture because my youngest, Andrew, had itch his brain, so he had a brain itch. So our oldest is Kevin. He's the tallest one there, but he's leaning over. He's 14. Matthew's got the glasses. He's 12. Caitlin is in the middle. She's 10. Nathan's the goofball there. He's 8, and then we have Emily in front. She is 5, Josiah is 3, and then Andrew is 1. And one of the things when we were talking about raising our kids, that we believe that the culture just brings so many lies about parenting. It really does. It emphasizes all those things. You have to look good. You have to be good at sports. You have to do great in school. All these things that culturally people find as important, and it doesn't focus on Jesus at all. It doesn't focus on what he taught us, and so that's where we are from there. So we're going to move on as to why this milestone is important to us. And it says that the world tells all children that life is all about them. Like you see everything, it's all revolving around them. Like Lois had said in the other one, that how parents just want to focus on being a parent, and they revolve all around their children. And then once their children go away, it's like, what do you have? So it's not just about them. They want to look out for number 1. And my favorite quote from Greg is navel gazing. Does anybody know what navel gazing is? Because I kept this in here purposely just to figure out what navel gazing was.
It's introspection, looking at yourself.
None of us knew, but
So,
Thank you.
so does anybody else knew what navel gazing was? This is a poll now. 2 people.
Yes.
This is my wife.
Oh, there we go. So we're going to count not well, 2
Did you
as
know
1.
Carrie?
So we're only going to count you as 1.
White people.
I'm diverse.
So that's
She says things that we would
That's
say.
a now we all-
we all know it.
but that's 5%.
Exactly.
5%.
Next year, you won't be able to get the same percentage, so we'll all know.
Well, maybe that's if you all take the same
We're
thing.
changing culture.
And this is the time when they established their own relationship with God. Statistically, or even developmentally, is where they come out of that concrete thinking, they start thinking abstractly. But this is the time where they start to own their own faith. So, I like numbers, I like statistics, always have. So this is some from the Barna Group. If you ever heard of George Barna, they have a lot of huge analysis out there. So some of these came from them. So this was a poll that was done out of just church-going families. So it wasn't a secular poll, it's just church-going families. It said 1 out of 10 people who grew up with a Christian background just lose their faith, they just walk away. Roughly 4 out of 10 Christians wander away from the institutional church. So they just stop going to church. Doesn't mean they stop believing, they just walk away from the church. And they lose that connection.
Does that 4 out of 10 include the other 1 out of 10?
Yes, it does. This is a total, roughly.
Do you know what year this was?
This was, I pulled these statistics last year. So this is from, some, like 20, what year was it? 2014, thank you.
Just subtract 1 from 15. You said you're a numbers guy, yeah.
Number 2014. And it's on camera. And 2 out of 10 young Christians feel lost between the church culture and the society that they want to influence. So they see that the church culture is one way, society is the other way, and there's no bridge. They can't see it. So, I mean, that'll say either 1, 4, and 2. So that's 7. So, 30%, you would roughly say, stay within their faith. But move from there. So this is a quote from George Barna. And he says, when we talked about what was important and why it's important, this is the age range of when they start to have their core beliefs. So it says during the age of 11 to 13, most kids undergo huge changes and challenges related to their self-image and their choices concerning morals, beliefs, relationships, and life goals. It often becomes a difficult time in the relationship between parents and kids, but is also one of the most crucial times for parents to make sure that they stay connected and accessible to their kids. So it's about having their heart. And I think that's a term you'll hear of the church talk about a lot, is having your children's heart and guiding them and having them there and to have that relationship established so that way you can help them walk through these difficult times. So then we move on to our just the basic characteristics of adolescence.
Okay. This isn't an exhaustive list at all, but it's just some of the things that, as we discussed, either from having our own children or knowing children that age, things that mark that age group that are different from what you're dealing with before that. And the first one we came up with was an increased awareness of self and others. So peer pressure comes in, they start to ask questions like, am I good enough? Am I competent? Am I desirable? How should I look? You just start to see all of that happening, because I know, like with my 5 and 2-year-old, I can pretty much dress them however I want, and they don't care. But as kids get a little older, they want to have a certain persona because they care about what people perceive of them. So that's definitely a change that happens in this age group. They also begin to think and dream about their future career, marriage and children. Maybe for little girls more marriage and children. I don't know if boys think about that a whole lot, but I think their future career switches from wanting to be like a cowboy or whatever it is your little ones want to be. Not that that's not a respectable career, but not in New Jersey anyway. To things that maybe interest them that they actually want to do with their life. So that would be a change that happens too. You also see that their fears start to become more rational. So, like last night I was reading to Asher in bed, and at one point he flicked the covers up over him. He's 5. And I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm afraid that the pterodactyls are going to get me, because he had just played a Jurassic Park Wii game. You don't see that with this age group. They're not afraid of pterodactyls. They're afraid. They know more what's going on in the world. They may be afraid of terrorism or things that actually we are afraid of as well. They start to become aware of those things. And that's because their thoughts are moving from concrete to abstract. They are not just concerned with the how or the what. They are much more concerned with the why. They want to talk about things and understand things. And can I have that book right there? Yes, this is a book. I actually just read it yesterday. Haven't read it to my kids yet, but like this book deals with talking about pornography with your children. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, but kind of, at first I thought this is going to be too much like a kid's book, like little kid's book when I just looked at it, but it actually goes through and explains the why of like your emotion centers in your brain and your prefrontal cortex, which is making your logical decisions. So if you let, if you continue to watch pornography and more pictures, it just explains how your emotion center gets stronger. It overrules your prefrontal cortex so that you no longer make decisions based on logic. And it explains the why. So I think for kids this age, answers like, you just don't do that because it's wrong, that's not necessarily good enough anymore, and they are starting to need to understand, well, it's because addictions can happen, and it's because, or whatever the situation you're dealing with. So that would be a marker of adolescence. Let's see. They refine their interests and become more of an individual and more independent. That's a fun thing to see with your kids when you start to realize this one's actually a really good artist or musician, or they like whatever, science fiction, or you start to really see their personalities come out at this age. We also talked a little bit about how there's overt things that come at them that we need to make them aware of, like when they're using, technology, just the bad things that can come at them, but there's also a ton of other subtle things that culture throws at them that they're gonna start to subconsciously pick up on. And they're taking all of that in at this age, which I think we'll talk about more later, like we're talking about doing her things and all of that. Does that come up in what you're talking about?
Nope.
Okay, then I'll do another book plug. I'm a book person. This book is called Do Hard Things. Has anybody read it or heard of it? I would highly recommend it. It's by Alex and Brett Harris, who wrote this when they were teenage boys, and it's basically their revolt against low teenage expectations. Our society expects very little of teenagers. They're supposed to be defiant, on their phone all the time, not producing anything. Like, that's what they were seeing of culture, and throughout history, teenagers have been very capable of doing amazing things. They have the brain power, they certainly have the time now, they have the potential. Can I have that other book?
Is that a book for boys or girls or parents?
We read it with our daughter too. We're reading it with our 3 older kids.
So for teens, for sure.
It's written by teenagers. I would recommend it, I would say maybe 9, 10 years old and up, even preparing to be a teenager. Like,
I think at 9, 10, it'd be a tough read to just give them and say,
yeah, I would
read
read it
this.
with them.
But they definitely could read it in chunks and get the content.
Yeah, our oldest son we actually got this book for him,
He was 12.
and he read it himself on his own when he was 12. So,
Right.
I mean, it's definitely a read, for teenagers, and he was able to come back with questions and things like that.
Yeah, and I think just biographies with kids that age, like, when they hear story after story of people who actually accomplished amazing things, it's empowering. Like, they can do those things. So, this is another one that I love, probably for a younger, like you were saying, 8, 9, 10. If you read Farmer Boy and the life of this 8, 9, 10-year-old boy and what he could do in a given day, which is such a far cry from what 8, 9, 10-year-olds are expected to do today. Like when our boys especially read this and we talked about it, we had great conversation. I think they became well aware of what life used to be like and what they can accomplish, what they can do. They don't have to have low expectations. So,
Who's the author of Farmer Boy?
Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Oh,
Yeah, it's part of
Yeah.
the Little House series.
It's like
okay.
beautifully slow, if that makes any sense. Like it's not going to be
Did
like
you read that line on the back of the
I
book
didn't.
jacket?
I should write book
This
jackets.
is beautifully slow.
It's a slow read. It's not going to be like watching something on Nickelodeon. But I think it had our kids' attention. Like it had it. So I would highly recommend that one.
And
So
the principles that we're gonna be talking about really function all throughout this book. It's part of their home environment, so it really reinforces what we're talking about today.
Right, so I think all that to say, one of the subtle things that will come against them as adolescents and then teenagers is that they're not supposed to be productive. It's not said in those words, but they will pick up on that. And then, of course, along with all of this mental development that's going on, they're physically changing as well, which is a big deal for them to go through during this time. That's all I have
That's
for
it.
markers.
All right. I sent a sign-in sheet, can make sure that keeps going around. If you're not on there, please put your name on there so that we know that you're here, because we'll wanna be able to follow up, later on. Okay, so this milestone that we're talking about, preparing for adolescence, basically is this: it sets the bridge, right? It establishes the bridge that transitions your child to adulthood. So it's really the staging area before your child is launched into like teenage years and adulthood, is what this milestone is all about. So here's what I'd like to do before we go a little bit further. If you could just we'll go around real quick and give your name, but give also the child or children that you're here because of, right? So which of your children, you don't have to give us all of your children, but which of your children that you're thinking about as you're sitting in this room, all right? And what's their age, their name and their age? You don't have to give your name and your age, just your name.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Let's start right here.
Jonathan and Sarah, and we're here for Rachel and Jeremy.
And they are
8 and 7.
8 and 7. Cool.
Paula, I think I'm still here. I'm here for Callie and Megan. They're 11 and 7.
My name's Susanna, and I'm here for my oldest 3, I think. Lily is 13, Ian is 11, and Elijah's 8. But he's best friends with his big brother. He's in this category somehow. They grow up too fast.
Mike and Kelly, and our oldest is Olivia, she's 11, and we have twins, Kyla and Mackenzie, who are 9.
Dan and Krista, I guess we'll pick the middle, Jake. Oh, they're 5. He's 10 years old.
My name's Jeff, my wife is Rebecca, our oldest is 9 years old, and her name is Eliana.
I'm Carrie. I'm here for Marco. He's 10.
Jeff and Danielle, we're here for Ethan and Cameron, they are 8 and 10.
Sonia Brown,
9 and 10.
I'm here.
9 and 10.
This just in.
I'm here for my 3 oldest, Richard, who's 13, and I think he fits into this a little more than the other sessions. And then my daughter's 11, and my middle son is 8. He's gonna be 9 very soon, so.
Dave Carter, and here for Juliana, who's 11, and Dawson is 8. To be 9. Good.
All right, let me pray for us, okay? So Jesus, we are here as representatives of a next generation. And Jesus, you have entrusted these precious lives to our care. And for good or for ill, God, they are linked to our leadership. And so God, I pray that number one, that would raise the flag of responsibility for us, and number two, it would bring us humbly before you and say, Father, help. And so I pray that as we consider this particular stage of development and preparing for adolescence, preparing for like this launching time into adulthood, I pray, God, that we would solidify some things in the lives of these children that we love. So guide us. Holy Spirit, I pray that you would speak to us this morning. In your name I pray, Jesus. Amen. Okay, so when we think milestones, we have, as you know, 8 milestones. So this is the 4th of our 8. And then with each milestone, we think of core competencies. What that means is that there are what we believe are core practices or core truths that in order to reach that milestone, you need to walk out these core competencies. So they would be like the fundamentals of preparing for adolescence. So we have 3, all right? And we're only going to talk about one, but I'm going to give you all 3 today. In your notes there, I think I left the notes for the other 2 that we're not going to talk about in there, so that you can have them. But we're going to have some other gatherings throughout the year where we'll get a chance to unpack the other milestones, but we're just going to, or the other competencies. But we're just going to talk about the first one. And the first one that we're going to talk about today is establishing a pattern of your child growing in God's design for both maturity and responsibility, along with independence and privilege. All right, so that's the one we're going to talk about today. But the other 2 are the second core competency for preparing for adolescence is affirming your child's design as male or female. Helping them understand that God has designed them, that God has a plan for their body, God has a plan for their sexuality, and God has designed them either male or female, and He's done that on purpose. And so helping them understand that design. And the third milestone for, the third core competency for this milestone is creating an environment of honest conversation on all subjects. Right, so you're really creating an environment where you can have honest dialogue, and you've created the kind of environment that, you know, it's a bridge of conversation that can sustain the weight of any topic. Right? And so there'll be some topics where you'll say, well, we're not ready for that conversation, but you're still creating the environment so that when the time is ready for that conversation, you can have that conversation. All right? So this is a key part of this particular milestone is creating an environment of honest conversation. So we're not going to touch on those second 2. We're going to really focus on number 1. So that's establishing a pattern of your child growing in both maturity, responsibility, and independence and privilege. I want you to know that God has a vision for your child increasing in responsibility, and He also has vision for you as parents decreasing in control. All right, so He wants, God's design for our children is, Dave, you'll appreciate this. I didn't share this with you earlier. I'm going to surprise you with a graph.
A graph, all
Right? So
Not a pie chart?
this is like the, this would be like the responsibility. Spell that with an R. Responsibility right there. Okay? So what's right now as a parent, and think an infant, right? Parents, high responsibility. Like, you know, if you don't care for your infant, they can't thrive apart from someone caring for them, right? They can't make their own dinner, right? That has to be provided for them. So protection, so high responsibility, but as time goes on, God's design is for you to lessen in that responsibility, or another way of saying it is lessen in control, right? You're bringing control over that child's life. Right, that's God's design. So at some point along here, you would move from you're the one making the decisions to this child at low responsibility. Somewhere along the line, it should shift, and they're the ones making the decisions. Right, so it's in this, right, this window that you're bringing your parenting leadership. And so milestones, like I would say milestone 1, very high. You're up in this category. Right, milestone 2, that's the coming under authority. Man, that's a big one. Right, like you're in charge. Why? Because God made you in charge. You don't have to understand what I'm telling you to do. Just do it. Like they need to get that. And when we get to milestone 3, it's coming down into that's the faith commitment one. We're wanting children to start like taking ownership, taking responsibility. It's not, well, Daddy told me I need to love Jesus. Right? It's something of, like, I'm wanting to follow Jesus. They're growing in this process of maturity. Right? So we're getting close to this area where we are wanting to move to launch them into them taking ownership of their decisions. And what's really cool is there's a period of time in, like, the teenage space of time where they can start owning responsibility, yet owning responsibility in the context of your home, in the safety of your home, under the leadership of you within your household. So they can fumble along, which is great because they're under the umbrella of your leadership, and then there'll come a time when they're not. And when that time comes, whether it's 17, 18, 19, 20, like when that time comes, like you're launching them out to be independent decision makers. So, maybe sometime you could color code that. So God has a vision for your child increasing in responsibility and parents decreasing in control. I want to show you this biblically. I was stunned because this was the same process Jesus went through. All right, so I'm going to read you this story, and I want you to listen for this growth related to Jesus and his parents. We don't get a lot of stories about Jesus growing up, but we get a couple. And so this is Luke 2, 40 to 51. And the child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. So now his parents went to Jerusalem, and they go every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, and his parents didn't know it. But supposing, that they were the big group, supposing he was with the relatives and acquaintances of the big group, they didn't find him for a little while. It was, I think it was like a couple of days. So obviously big deal, right? Can't find my child. So they returned to Jerusalem, and they were searching for him. After 3 days, they found Jesus in the temple. Do you imagine, like the kids you just named, like 3 days later, you're finding them, and they're in the temple. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, this is huge, "Son, why have you treated us so? Like, how dare you treat us like this? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And then he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house?" Like, that was Jesus' answer. Like, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? What's happening in this narrative, right? What's happening in this narrative is Jesus is growing in responsibility and maturity, and he's becoming an independent decision maker where he's now saying, I need to be about my Father's business. God's called me to some things. And Mary and Joseph are in this place of saying, wait a minute, no, you're little baby Jesus, right? Like we're in charge of you. Okay, and the reason I say it's somewhere in this point of tension is because of what happens in the rest of the story. Because Jesus isn't finished yet. This isn't where he launches his ministry. But it said this, they did not understand what he was saying when he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Like, Jesus was at that adolescent stage. And it said, like, he's growing in his awareness of, I got to be about my Father's business. Yet, he submitted to his parents' leadership. It says he was submissive to them, right? And then he continued to grow up under their leadership. But you could see what was happening in that story was Jesus was starting to assert some of his independence of, wait a minute, there's a calling on my life. I have to follow God. God's called me to some things. Right? And that's a move away from the dependence on Joseph and Mary to independence and his response to God the Father. So I just find that a stunning little insight into the stage of life that we're parenting right now, that Jesus walked in. So, just a couple of principles I want to share with you. Let's see. During this season of adolescence, parents, you want your child to start taking responsibility for their faith in Jesus, just as Jesus did here. Taking responsibility for their faith in God and the pursuit of God's purposes for their lives. You want there to be something of a transition happening for your child where it's not, I follow God for mom and dad's sake, but there's something of a relationship or a response from them to God that you've been training them that you've been training them in. During this stage, you want to encourage your child to start using some of their gifts and responsibilities for the benefit of other people. Like there should be some attentiveness to how God has put them together. How can they leverage that for the blessing of other people? That's starting to take responsibility, or a stewardship principle. Also at this age, I highly recommend you start teaching your child to master something. Like start teaching them to really hone in on some area of development or skill so that they can learn the process of mastery. Right? So our daughter dances, and I don't want her to master ballet because I think her future is going to be wrapped up in being a professional ballerina. I want her to learn to master ballet so that she learns the discipline and the work that's required for mastering anything. That make sense? So it's not just about what is that discipline and are you going to get a career from that discipline. It's really about the pattern of what it takes to master anything. So there's some discipline implications. There's some discipline implications for this particular stage of development. And so basically it goes kind of like this. For my kids, I'm not at this stage. I'm not spanking them any longer. But primarily what I'm using in terms of discipline for them is this: that there is no privilege without responsibility. No privilege without responsibility. So any privilege they have, it is matched with responsibility, or probably I should say the other way around. Demonstrating responsibility equals receiving privilege. Right? So I had a conversation about 4 weeks ago with a mom, and it just stunned me as I was preparing for this when I thought about that conversation. Her son and my son, both 13 or 12, almost 13 years old, and I had found a pocket knife where we were all standing, and I picked it up. I was like, "Oh, if my son sees this, you know, he'll want that pocket knife." And you know, and then I shared that like anytime we go anywhere on vacation, like if he's getting a souvenir, he wants it to be, you know, a knife, a pocket knife. And she was just stunned, like, your son has a knife? You allow your child to have your little boy to have a pocket knife? And I was like, yeah, and he has that knife, but because he's demonstrated maturity. And with that maturity, you know, with demonstrating responsibility comes the privilege of being able to carry that knife. I'm, you know, he makes good choices, so that you know, it's a privilege that he has. So she was just, you know, stunned by the fact of kind of my crazy parenting that I would allow my 12, 13-year-old to have a pen knife. Later on in the conversation, she began to tell me how her son has been stalked by a sexual predator on his Pinterest account. And in my mind, I was like, your son has a Pinterest account? Like, so it's okay for him to be out having conversations with whomever, people you don't know can speak into his life, yet you're concerned about this. So anyways, just was shocked by, so there was no demonstration of maturity then equaled freedom, or maturity equaled independence, or maturity equaled privilege, right? It was just, you're a certain age, I give you this. You know, I was thinking through even like the use of technology, right? That is a privilege, not a right. Okay, so if your child is going to have any form of technology, they need to demonstrate responsibility. Or in no way do they get that freedom. No way do they get that privilege. Right? I mean, that is a dangerous, that's far more dangerous than a 2-inch pen knife, I think. So those are kind of principles for this stage of development is, so we match privilege, or we match freedom with maturity and responsibility. I don't particularly like the word punish when talking about like our children, particularly this age. I don't really like punishment because punishment is really punitive. It's about somebody paying back what they've done. They get the punishment of what's happened. I prefer the word like consequences or training. So Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, or discipline a child. I like that terminology because it's pointing to process of what we want to teach them. Right? So let me back this up. If you are wanting to discipline because of a lack of maturity in a child's life, right, then the way that we discipline is due to that lack of maturity, there's a removal of certain privileges. Right? So you take away privileges when you see the immaturity. And what's the implication of that? Well, when I see the maturity level come back up, guess what? Then the privileges come back up. Or the freedom comes back up. Right? But I have to see that in order for you to receive this. And using your strength and leadership as a parent to implement that. As opposed to punishment would be not necessarily related to them growing in maturity. It's, you did something bad, you're going to feel pain. Right? So really, a lot of times, what does that reinforce? It reinforces their ability to do what they want to do, and so as long as you don't see them, then they're okay. As opposed to forming in them maturity, responsibility, and then with that coming freedom and privilege. Okay, let's see. With responsibility, so what are some things that your children should be at this stage, what should they be responsible for? I got 3 categories of things. They should be responsible for people. They should be responsible for people. Like there should be something of, when they make decisions about things, they should be considering someone else. Whether it's, you're a sibling, whether it's a friend, like they should be considering people. Really around this age, our older children started to have greater responsibility with their younger children, like being considerate of other people. What else should they be responsible for? They should be responsible for jobs around the house. Like there should be things that, you guys live in the same house, you have responsibilities, they should also have responsibilities within their home. And they just do them because you're a family, and that's part of being a family, is there's responsibilities. The trash has to be taken out, right? And so mark a responsibility. And again, with each responsibility, then comes privilege. And if they're not responsible, then privilege is lost. Other things they should be responsible for is people. I'm sorry, I meant to say things. People, things, and then priorities. They should learn to manage some priorities at this age, right? Not all things should be of equal priority. So getting a snack and doing your homework, or cleaning your room versus playing a game, they may all be fine things to do, but they need to learn to order those priorities, right? And you should be having those conversations. They should be starting to do that, of ordering those priorities. So then a couple of examples would be their homework. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to do our homework before we, do whatever. So again, any kind of privileges, whether it's playing a game, whether it's screen time, none of those are rights. They're all privileges that should be delved out based on responsibility and maturity. Food is a right, but snacks not necessarily. All right, that's enough from me. Why don't we give some examples? If Dave and Janice, if you guys can think of an example of that, it helps establish this pattern of your child growing in establishing the privilege and responsibility. You guys have any, just small, looking for small ones?
So one of the things is Nathan, our 8-year-old, so he has the responsibility of doing dishes. That's something we've helped him with. He's more than capable of, rinsing off, unloading a dishwasher and putting it in the dishwasher. So as he establishes that responsibility, he does it routinely, he does it without being told, he does it without being complaining, he doesn't drag his feet, he doesn't cry or whine. He's showing that maturity and that responsibility that we have given him. His privilege is that he doesn't go to bed earlier with the younger kids. So like we have 2 different types of bedtimes. He's in that transition time where we would let him stay up later and go to bed with big kids. And so for him, that's huge. You know, he doesn't feel like a little kid. So as he establishes that pattern, then he can stay up with the big kids. But when he starts to whine or fuss or complain about, I don't want to do the dishes, or it was a big heavy baking day or something like that, you know, he just looks at the pots, he's defeated, you know, and he'll need some correction there. Then he goes, well, you know, you're going to do that, and then off to bed you go.
That is
So
great.
you go with the little kids. You go with your 1-year-old son, or not son. 1-year-old.
Well, there's our problem.
See, culture.
So-
Are you saying that same day that he has an issue with doing the dishes, that day he goes to bed earlier?
No, it's an established
Oh.
pattern.
Like, so if he's doing it several days in a row, okay, you're switching back, you're reverting back to early bedtime.
Yeah, we just start talking. It's really not. It's about an hour roughly.
Yeah.
But for him, that's huge. It's a huge deal.
That's great. I'll come in just a second. One thing I just want to stamp out what you're hearing from that example, right, is responsibility. Then with that responsibility comes privilege. So if the responsibility isn't there, the privilege is not there. And then, you know, the fact that it might not be implemented immediately, that just gives space for that growth process. The other principle is maturity and freedom. Staying up later, that's increased freedom, right? But that comes with the maturing process. And I love the consequence fits. Because if you're not mature, then you have to go to bed with the others that are not mature, the younger crew, right? Like that's a great concept. So I'm sorry, is Rebecca? Yeah.
So what if you've already given privileges that you didn't know were privileges, and then you need
Great
to
question.
like backtrack and go back to the like, oh wait, you've been whining about doing your chores. Like, how do you
Excellent.
get that?
I think that starts with a conversation. I mean, you have to realize that maybe you're going to implement some new things, you want to do some things. That's the time to sit down with your kids and say, this is what we see, this is what we're trying to do, and this is going to be the established pattern. But it has to be consistent.
So you think then like take away the privilege first and then wait to see the maturity and then bring it back, or?
Well, I would say it depends on what it is, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
something that could like severely hurt them, then yeah, just take it right away, and you know. But if it's something that that you're not have that level of concern and you can let it play out a little bit, I would have the conversation and say, and probably you thought this through, just maybe unintentionally, you know, and to say you realize this is a privilege, this isn't a right. And as long as you can maintain this, then you can have that. But when that's, you know, when you're not acting responsibly or maturely, then I'm going to have to take that away. So I think that sets you up for being able to address that pretty quickly. So I would have the conversation right away, but I wouldn't necessarily just say, this is gone. Again, unless it's something that would be dangerous for them.
I kind of have an example that goes along with that. My 13-year-old has a Facebook. And my husband and I discussed it, we discussed it with him, we discussed the expectations we had with him. I have the password, I check it on a regular basis. Well, the other day I checked it, and he told his friend sent him a picture of a girl. She was fully clothed and everything, but it was a picture of a girl that this boy liked. And my son said, wow, she's really sexy. And I immediately froze. And my first thought was take the iPhone, deactivate his Facebook, just get rid of every access he has to any kind of internet. And then I was like, wait a second, don't get too extreme, but I'm still, I still have his iPod, but I don't know where to go. Like, I don't know if I should deactivate his Facebook and be like, no, that's it. But I did have the conversation with him about, I understand you think girls are beautiful, and, they are, but I don't appreciate the word sexy, because then that shows that you're looking at her in a wrong manner. But I don't know where to go with the whole Facebook thing. Like, should I continue to allow him to have it? Should I keep monitoring it? Should I just take it away? Like, you know what I mean?
The challenging part with that is it's not just your son, right? So you
Right.
can, it's one thing to monitor your son, but you can't monitor what comes into, what gets sent to him. So that's where I would probably cut that pretty far back, in terms of that one. I haven't thought all the way through, my kids we don't do Facebook.
Yeah.
Their interactions are, so they can text, but they can text with only people that we approve.
Well, the sad thing is, this is somebody I did approve. It's
Yeah.
like one of his friends, I know him,
Yeah.
he comes to our house on a regular basis, type of thing. And like I said, it wasn't a bad picture. It was a girl, it was just her face, really.
Yes, but it was an image and it was sexy.
Right.
Like those are
To him,
those
right.
are two like flags for me of they're looking at an image and they're using that language, and she's becoming a sexy object. So that'd be a really big flag.
Yeah.
Want to give you we gave you kind of a couple of smaller examples, but one of the things that I think is important is to do kind of bigger initiatives to try and teach kids some of these principles. So we have a couple of what I would call like kind of big like celebration events that we do in our families that help really solidify this. There you go. So keepers and contenders, that's something that affirms the masculine and the feminine specifically. Like keepers is something that Angie and Jan work on together, and they do certain events with the kids, with the girls, and then contenders is something that Dave and I do like really weekly. We're not quite as organized as the keepers crew.
We have weekly conversations.
Yeah, that's true. But these would be some bigger ones. Then I've done a thing with my boys, and it happens to be around their 10-year-old year, where I list out some things that I want them to grow in over that year. And this is where they get their penknife, is if they can over that year grow in these responsibilities, then I will give them the privilege of having a penknife. And actually every week, well, it's supposed to be every week, we missed some weeks, but weekly we would look at how are you doing with these responsibilities, and then I would actually put a dollar or some breakdown of that dollar based on how they're doing into a little account, so that at the end of the year, how much money do you have, and we can use that amount of money to go purchase a penknife, which is a big deal for a boy to have his own. At least for my boys, really big deal to have this thing that represents kind of strength and maturity, and but that's only after a year of really growing in those areas of responsibility.
The other thing we've done is Passport to Purity, which is something put out by Family Life. I think there's an example of it downstairs. For me, I've done it with my two oldest boys. It's more as a gateway into maturity, bit like their identity in Christ, how Christ sees them, and also it starts to get into a little bit about dating and a very old term called courting if they want to do that, but it gives them a foundation. They kind of see like how as they start to mature and they start, it's just really for like prepubescent, as that help to guide them through that. And when they start, for my two boys, they start talking about girls and she's pretty cute or something like that, and it kind of helps guide them. And the idea is to establish something before they get to that point, so that way they have a reference. They kind of have what they call a map, and that way it helps them. Also helps open up conversation. Hey, Dad, my oldest son likes a girl. She thinks she's cute. Hey, Dad, I have this, all these awkward conversations that I have to have with my oldest son. And, it's awkward for me because I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready for my son to be 14. Makes me feel old. But still, it opens up for dialogue. Thank you. I think you're the same age, right? Yeah, let's check.
I think, did we get the big ones?
This was your talking to kids.
That was ours? Yeah, we covered that one already.
This was our special days. So, like for us, we have a large family. We have 7 children. So sometimes that alone time is kind of hard to get through. But we've established like once a month we'll take one of the kids out and have a special day with them. Like it'll generally be.
I'm sorry, can I call some, please?
Now you're really not here.
Now you're really not here, yeah.
Going to the principal.
So it's nothing big, it's nothing extravagant, it's a lunch, or something that they want to do. For, Kevin, who's 14, I took him to Secores, and it was like huge. Dad, I love Secores, I want to go back there every day, But it was special for him, because he had some one-on-one time with Dad. We got to go do something he liked. He loves books. He goes to go to bookstores and just take time to look at things, and for him, that's very memorable, and plus he gets to spend time and open up conversation. So it allows for them to feel, I don't want to say, I guess for lack of a better term, they feel loved, they feel like they're important, they has that special time with the parent one-on-one time when they generally don't get that, just because of the craziness of the day. So it works out really well for us, and for us grocery shopping, the same thing. Once a week, one of the kids comes with us, now I get to do the shopping. But we take one of the kids and they just have a good time, just go out shopping, food shopping, and they get a little snack, and we have a little drink, just again, it's a couple hours alone time we can talk. Just a way to make space.
Yeah, and the idea of kind of the larger events is because you want to have something that stamps it out. Right, so we do the pen night because that's a big deal for them, and we want to be able to stamp out that sense of responsibility with privilege. So the weekend getaway with Passport to Purity, it's those conversations happen in the context of a special, like Dave's taking his son to a special event, and they talk through these conversations, but then they're doing something that's pretty, that's memorable. They're doing ropes courses and.
Yeah, we did, like, for Kevin, we went to the Poconos and spent some time talking about this, and then we went on the ropes course. And then with Matthew, just recently, we did a canoe trip down the Delaware Water Gap. We did like 3-4 hours of canoeing.
All right, we want to have some more time for questions. We've already been able to do a couple, so let's we'll just put everything else on pause there. And what questions do you guys have?
I have no idea how to deal with money as a reward, like allowance, that whole thing has kind of been brought up. We give you money if you do your chores, if you don't do your chores, we don't give you money. We're just like all mixed up about that, and they want money. Any thoughts on how to deal with that?
I'll give you just one initial one, and you guys feel free to jump in. So with chores, that's one that I have not given a monetary reward for chores, because that goes back to, for us, like this is what it means to be part of this family. Yeah, you get dinner, you get to live here, we'll pay electric bills, like, we'll do all of that, and we all do, we're all responsible here for that. But I do think it's wise to start training them in money. So there's times where they will get, whether it's gifts from people, or they'll go work somewhere, like for a grandparent. That one I've allowed my parents to give some money if they're doing like a special project with them, because I want them to see, some of that. And then we've taken money and split it up into categories, so as they do get some income, like there's a tithing one, there's a spend one, and then a save one, and then there's percentages for how to do that.
But no allowance, like monetary allowance.
I have not. Do you guys do that?
So Dave Ramsey, he actually speaks to this when it comes to children and allowances. He doesn't call it allowance; he calls it commission. Commission. So chores, like Greg said, that's a responsibility of the family. So that's what we do as a family, that we need to get through life and stuff like that. That's not something you get paid for. So commission, he would say, is, and I don't quite remember it exactly, but it's more like, this is what you do, how well you do it. Anything above and beyond that will get a set amount or a commission. If you don't do it, then you don't get the commission for it. But and then he would split up in the 3 categories. to teach them how to manage their money, so tithing, saving, and spending. So,
So you mean like extra jobs for commission? Like washing the car or?
sure, and that's something that you can establish as a family, you know, I've seen things that they have like a cork board and it says for doing this, there's a little monetary amount right there, and they would have it, so like washing the car would be worth $1, and, or, you know, mopping the floor would be worth 50 cents or whatever.
Doing
But-
taxes.
So that's something we can do as a family, because obviously every family's different, you guys help, everybody has different dynamics. And then that would be one way of doing it, and just, but it's also an opportunity to teach them how to budget, how to spend, how to save, and work ethic, and, you know, cause if I can, so for instance, my son Nathan could do the dishes, but he could do it sloppily, you know, put a bunch of dirty dishes in there, and then, you know, really, that's not really worth anything, it's just cause he has to redo it. But like I said, and that way you get to the tithing, saving, and spending.
Carrie?
I grew up in a household that's very much like what you're saying. Like, my parents didn't think that you should get money for getting good grades or doing chores. It's just what you're supposed to do. And Seth comes from a different perspective, which we don't give allowance for chores. But that idea of how well you do with something, I mean, it depends on what you want to teach your kids in regards to money. But the idea that they have to work for something, but that's how it's gonna work in real life. You're gonna do a job and you're gonna be expected to do that job well. And then the idea of commission is how well do you do a job? You get 25 cents for this, but you can get 50 cents if you really clean up. If you like vacuum, but you're gonna vacuum around this, you know, the furniture, but you're gonna like move the furniture, do that, you can get $1 for that. So it's just the value that you want to say, not like you get paid to do something that you're supposed to do. It's like, do a good job, this is what's gonna be expected of you in life.
That's good. Again, I just wanna stamp out what we're saying. We're using the general principle of responsibility is privilege, right? And so the privilege we're talking about here is a monetary privilege. So again, what I would just add into that, and Carrie said it, is what is the value you want to reinforce? What is the privilege you want to reinforce, right? So there would be some privileges that you would look into our culture and say, that's not a privilege I'm going to give my child. Like, that's a no. They're not going to be in that environment or go do that thing or, you know, whatever. It doesn't. That would be inappropriate. But you know, you have to make that call. But the general principle is responsibility and then privilege, or maturity, freedom. Yeah.
This is a different question. So we use the word responsibility a lot in our house, and the word consequence, and normally it has to do with this. But I am struggling with this age group on consequences for like attitude, emotional outbursts. My older two are, I mean, they're pretty even keeled, so it's not like they're crazy or rebellious or anything like that. But still, like, you know, they're humans, and I want to address these things. And I don't know, I'm struggling like in those instances where I'm like, that was wrong, what you just did. I don't know how to, what kind of consequences to give. It's not the same, it's not spanking, it's not because I told you so. But I can't like never discipline either.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense.
One thing that's like contrast that to you know, for disciplining a 12 to 16 month old or 16 to 24, like at that age, your consequences have to be like immediate, right? Because you don't have the cognitive ability to say, hey little baby, remember last week you did, you know, whatever. But you do have that at this age, where you can sit down and say, I've been seeing this attitude issue, the eye rolling, like a lack of self-control. So then ask the question, what are privileges they have that are connected to self-control?
Well, so, for example, one of my kids, I mean, it's not so much that they're giving me attitude, but it's their behavior because of what's going on in their heart. Like, they never complain about their chores, but I have to, like, I'm like, I literally just asked you 10 times to come do this, you know, and, you know, I have 5 kids too, I can't be running after you and you're 11, you know what to do, and it's that kind of thing, like, I see this pattern, I'm having trouble addressing it, and
So-
giving an appropriate consequence.
Yeah, so I would say with that one, there's gotta come a point where you are assessing your expectations and then bringing consequences. So,
Okay.
so if they're given, you know, chores and they're not doing them and you're having to say it 10 times, then I think there should then be a time where you say, sorry, because of that pattern, I can't give you this privilege. Like, it's
Right.
exhausting, I can't chase you around, say it, and then stay on you to do it. So I gotta expect that you can mature enough to hear my voice once, carry it into the other room, and complete the task. Without you having, but you can do that a little bit later, right? It doesn't have to be in that moment, but there does have to come a time where, so there's gonna be a time where they're gonna get a privilege, whether it's they have free time to go outside or something like that. At that point, you can inspect, did this get done, this get done, this get done? Sorry, you can't go. So in time, you can trust that process that they're gonna pick up on, oh,
Right,
I need to get
right.
this stuff done. And that's where at this age, you have a little bit longer of a bandwidth to really develop them in that. But the key is there's gotta come a time where there's accountability for the expectations. And then once you hold them accountable, that's when you bring the consequence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, I mean, are you able to give some examples of types of consequences?
No video games, no anything.
I know, I did like, yeah, I think like, oh, no TV, no internet.
Whenever they love the movies.
What else do you take away?
What do they go to?
Always works.
So if it's emotional outbursts,
Oh, of course.
if it's emotional outbursts, like being able to go to someone else's house, like that would be a big issue of trust. Like if you can't be
Yeah,
under
yeah.
my authority and be in control, I'm not gonna be able to send you to, you know, fill in the blank.
Right.
So I just think that's where, to me, it's, you see the behavior, figure out what is the value, the maturity that you're looking for, and then you bring a consequence that would be associated to that principle. So that, like that's where we use the term natural consequences,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
connected to that. But, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, cause I think we're in similar situations, we have 5 kids and we homeschool, so they're home all day, it's busy. And at this age, of my older 3, so 10, almost 13, 15, there are certain things, like I realized I was exhausting myself every day, even telling them to do these things.
Yeah.
And they're old enough for me to not even have to say it. So I'm not saying this works perfectly in our house. I don't wanna give you the impression that my kids get up and clean their room every day. It's still difficult. But a 10-year-old does not need you every day to say, now you need to make your bed, now you need to put in your drawers, now you need to pick your towel up off the floor. Like, they are well into a maturity level that they can be responsible for that on their own. So whether it's making a list that has to be done every day, or you don't, whatever you decide that it is, I think that you can relieve a lot of stress from yourself as a parent to not have to walk over them, and it drains me. Like, I feel like it makes me feel naggy, and I don't wanna be in that position. So here's your jobs, they're your job every day of your life, and I don't wanna hear anything different. Like, that's how I feel. So instead, I don't necessarily say it to them that way, but I think I'll do another book plug. Yeah.
I was waiting for it.
This is one of my favorites. My kids hate the title. It's my favorite so much. This book's called The Self-Propelled Advantage, and I'm not saying you have to read this book, but there is a huge advantage in your family when your kids learn to be self-propelled. And so the sooner, if they're mature enough to take something on, and you don't need to be there, you know, telling them every day or whatever it is, the better your home life is going to flow. So, you know, like for this lady, she's also a homeschooler, so what she does is she gives them all their books for the whole year in September. She makes them break the school year down into quarters, and their books into quarters, and whatever they need to get done by the end of that quarter, it has to be done. I don't care if you do it all the first 8 weeks of school and give yourself a vacation. I don't care if you push it off, like that's like her mentality. I don't say that works perfectly with me, but her kids have learned by the time they're in middle school, I have to get X, Y, Z done by this date. And they've also learned to set those patterns for themselves, like that's her. And I've tried to implement a lot of that, and it's been very helpful, and that it's not perfect. Like I said, I don't wanna give you the impression that, you know, my kids just do those things, but it has been very helpful. Like, these are your responsibilities, they're not mine, they are your, I am not responsible to
Go
get
from
your
my
schoolwork
shoulders to
done.
your shoulders.
You are responsible, like in our house, it's a 95 or above, where you go back and repeat the assignment until it can be that. If you need help, I am more than willing to help you, get the help you need, whatever it is, that's my role. But my job is not to complete your assignments or to stand over you and say, did you do this, did you do this, come on, let's do it, blah, blah, blah. And when I get like that, I feel horrible, so, yeah. All that to say that they're old enough to do those things, and the sooner you can pass that off, the smoother it is.
I think most kids, you gotta change your consequences. Most kids can adapt very well, that if you're continuing taking the same thing away, they'll find something other to
Right.
replace it.
Right.
So if it's always their phone or their video games or their friends, and it's the same consequence, they'll adapt and they'll just shift their focus to something else that's gonna fill their time. So you gotta vary it up some.
And when you do that, then eventually it becomes punitive, where you're just punishing them because they
From their
like it,
friends, right.
as opposed to natural, where it's not matching their level of responsibility. The other thing I would say is, when you see repeated things like this, then maybe it's time to move away from negative consequences to like some positive rewards. So setting up something that would have some longevity with your kids of saying, listen, over this next month, if you guys can do these chores every day and I don't have to repeat it, you know, and then there's some kind of like celebration at the end of that. But I think the key is clear expectations and then that accountability part with the consequence, whether that's a positive or the negative. All right, well we're over time. If you have more questions, you can ask Rick. You can answer those. But I want you to know, like, we want to be here just like as you're journeying through this. Like, we have kids your age, so this is stuff that we are willing to talk about more with you as you walk this out this year. Angie went through some of the resources that are here.